Thanks, everyone. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Scotland Excel Annual Conference 2022. It's great to have you with us here today. We had our first annual conference in 2009, and as many of you know, the purpose of today is to bring our sector together, think strategically, improve our knowledge and learn from experts and each other. So we've got a really interesting agenda for you. Today, we will hear about the challenges facing our sector. We'll talk about supply chain disruption, which is hugely important for all of us, and the development and resilience of supply chains or otherwise. We'll also focus on serious organised crime by understanding how to spot price fixing. We'll discuss the increasingly important subject of environmental sustainability. And we've got a session on mobilising climate and social action through collaboration, innovation and leadership. We'll discuss how to turn waste into an opportunity through the circular economy, as well as having a workshop session on the climate emergency. Working towards net zero by 2045 is a huge focus for all of you and for us. And at Scotland Excel, we're making sure that our portfolio of contracts continues to support you in order to achieve this. Our second generation energy efficiency contractors framework is now live, and our new first generation electrical vehicle charging infrastructure framework has just gone live to support you as well. And of course, our new build residential framework continues to enable development of carbon neutral homes. And we're preparing for the next generation of this, which we hope is going to be even better. So I'm very grateful to all of the speakers who have taken time from their busy schedules to be here with us. And as always, we welcome your thoughts. The hashtag for the event is #SXLconference. Please join the discussion, and I look forward to reading your comments. So let's get started by introducing our first speaker, Alan Russell, who's the Chief Executive at Renfrewshire Council. So Alan has worked at Renfrewshire for 24 years. He is currently the Chief Executive, but has previously been the Council's Director of Finance and Resources and the Head of Corporate Finance as well. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what Alan has to tell us. And without further ado, I'll hand over to you, Alan. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Julie, for that introduction, and thanks for inviting me along this morning to speak to your conference. And I suppose the question, or topic I was posed was the challenges and opportunities that are facing local authorities over the next year, and I think that's it's a really complex and interesting topic, a real mixture of new and existing challenges. But what I would say at the very outset is, as Julie says, I've been involved in local government in Renfrewshire for 24 years, and 20 of that in senior finance positions. And I think I can safely say that where we find ourselves now is, for me, absolutely the most challenging and complex environment that local government and probably public sector across Scotland has ever been in and ever faced. So it's probably a really good time to reflect on this question. I think COVID really illustrated the breadth and scope of local authorities and our reach and their activities and the critical leadership role that we play across supporting our communities. But COVID hasn't gone away, and although we're transitioning into a far more positive and stable phase, we will be finding new ways of progressing our ambitions and responding to new challenges in tandem to this ongoing journey. And also with the recent elections, we're now moving into this next phase of activity, developing and agreeing priorities for the short, medium and long term in the context of our new political environment. So I've only got about 15 minutes or so. I think I could easily talk about this agenda for over an hour, but I'm going to take the opportunity this morning to provide you with maybe a flavour of just some of the issues facing local authorities as we move forward. Just can move on to the next slide, please. So the focus of your conference, just heard from Julie, is Scotland moving to net zero and our hopes for a green economy. I think this is a an ideal place to start when we consider the challenges and opportunities and critical role for local authorities in 2022 and beyond. The COP26 Glasgow Agreement included, quite rightly, a specific reference to the vital role of local authorities, and acknowledging that tackling the climate emergency requires collective effort at all levels of government, across all sectors and all citizens. And in 2020, just prior to the pandemic, Renfrewshire Council, similar to many others across the UK, declared a climate emergency and is aiming to achieve net zero by 2030. Now, that is an admirable leadership, ambition and statement of intent, but in equal measure, from my perspective, an immense challenge for the organisation to achieve. And for me, one of the most pressing priorities is translating that ambition into a working roadmap for the organisation itself, working hard to find new and innovative ways to reduce our own carbon emissions, modernise our assets, such as our buildings and our fleet, while minimising the consumption and our waste. And critically, dealing with the very large elephant in the room for me in relation to climate change, and that's climate finance and how we address the cost of that transition. Understanding how we actually get our own house in order, and in many ways, I think will be the easy part. And I say that because as a council, we only contribute around 3% to the carbon emissions across Renfrewshire. And I would expect that that's broadly reflective of other council areas. So the council's bigger and indeed key role, I think, will be one of community leadership, showcasing what can be done and positively influencing their partners, businesses and their communities, and making it easier for them to make that sustainable transition and choices for themselves. Our own research at Renfrewshire has shown that over 70% of our citizens that we surveyed want to do more to personally tackle climate emergency. But the key barrier is not knowing where to start. So as a trusted voice, local government can help make things simpler, clearer, less daunting, by showing easy and sensible ways to help the environment and help our own pockets. There's also a need for considerable support at a Scottish and UK national level to get to net zero. I think there's no doubt about that. Investment in change and fundamental infrastructure on the largest emitting areas such as transport and energy is needed absolutely at a national level. However, in terms of local government and local government procurement specifically, I think we also need to recognise that we have very significant buying power, and we can help to influence the green focus in our supply chain markets through utilising their own sustainable procurement powers. We can absolutely make a difference, and again, both through our own consumption and by demonstrating to others how it can be done. I think working closely with our suppliers, the local businesses, we can explore ways we can both reduce our climate impacts and support businesses of all sizes to make that just transition towards net zero. And as part of the transition to net zero, it's critical that Scotland's recovery from COVID is green, with an emphasis on good green jobs and skills. And we have the levers within our procurement powers to, again, positively influence this. Promoting sustainable, fair work practices and supporting local economy through our community wealth building, keeping our spending power as local as possible, and utilising our assets for everyone and benefiting local people in ways that promote our green ambitions and make sure that rebuilding our economy isn't achieved at the expense of the environment. Next slide, please. Tackling inequalities and progressing social renewal will be a key focus for local government in 2022 and unfortunately well beyond. The financial crisis, which took the best part of the last decade to fully recover from, the pandemic, developing climate crisis, and most recently the global economic fallout from the Ukraine-Russia war, has touched and affected populations across the globe. But what these major global events have absolutely reinforced for me is what we already know, and that is that the impact of such negative events are not felt equally across our society. Those who are already disadvantaged are and have been disproportionately impacted, and are also least able to cope and recover. And we're seeing that being exacerbated significantly by the rapidly developing cost of living crisis. I think economically and socially, it's a deeply worrying time for everyone. The speed, breadth and depth and reach of the cost of living crisis to date, I think, has been quite breathtaking. Families that are struggling are greater in numbers than ever before. And critically, in-work poverty is increasing rapidly. You may well have seen recent headlines yourself about fuel poverty now capturing average earners across the UK as a greater proportion of their salary is eaten up by rising energy and fuel costs. So tackling social, economic and health inequalities, and in particular child poverty, and ensuring a fair recovery from COVID-19 are areas which local government will have a laser-sharp focus on over the coming years, and I think like never before. The local authorities are well placed to target services where they're needed most throughout the pandemic and beyond, working with their partners, with supported families and communities. And our officers across all services understand the challenges being faced and are doing their best to make sure that people access the support we need. But despite the best efforts, child poverty continues, with 1 in 4 children living in poverty, according to the latest official figures, and that's forecast to increase even with the current interventions that are happening. An impact on children and young people from the pandemic has been absolutely profound. Education impact, social and development impacts, and financially through hitting their families' pockets. So as we move forward towards a new normal and longer-term recovery, we need to ensure we take individuals and communities with us and support those who have been disproportionately impacted. They were struggling before, struggling even more so now, and our ambition should be how we give all our communities the opportunities to thrive in the future and not struggle to just survive. And the response is far from straightforward. It's going to be complex, really challenging agenda for local government to successfully navigate. But it's certainly not one that can be progressed in isolation. We'll need really significant and effective partnership working within what will be limited resources. There's certainly several avenues, I think, in which a direct role and contribution can be brought to the table by those within the procurement world. So promoting fair work practice and supporting access to employment and training opportunities, working to support the development of businesses locally to access public sector procurement opportunities. The SME sector is critical to the Scottish economic landscape, and a thriving one will support job creation and local employment opportunities. We've made great strides across local authorities in terms of promoting and driving the outcomes that can be achieved through community benefits derived from our contracts, and the role of community benefits is really important in providing the opportunity to invest and enhance local communities, often in really innovative ways. So this will help us in the recovery from the pandemic. It will help us with our transition to net zero, and it can help our communities and our people to thrive in the future. Next slide, please. The developing national policy landscape will absolutely continue to be a major driver of activity and focus across local government, and I think consequently local government's procurement agenda. 2022 will be a significant year, I'm sure you're all aware, for our health and social care services, with the legislation to enable the establishment of the National Care Service in Scotland due to be laid before Parliament in the summer. This national policy direction represents the biggest change potentially to local government, indeed the public sector landscape for generations in Scotland, and its impact on procurement potentially will be equally significant. So how community health and social care services are commissioned at local level, I think potentially will be subject to significant change and feel very different. What procurement and commissioning will look like under the new National Care Service hopefully will start to emerge more clearly over the coming months, I'm sure, along with many other aspects of this significant public sector reform agenda, and will help us all to understand exactly what we should expect and what it means moving forward. The Scottish Government's National COVID Recovery Plan focuses on 3 outcomes: financial security for low-income households, well-being of children and young people in good green jobs and fair work. This plan will absolutely be a driver for local government activity, as well as the areas of funding we're likely to see and access and how we're expected to contribute to these outcomes. And increasingly, local government's got a central role in the delivery of national policy commitments, whether it's 1140 hours, attainment in education, the promise, whole family support, universal free school meals, all the way down to investment in play parks and active travel, all of which I think will bring procurement challenges for all local authorities looking to make best use of our funding and procure similar types of goods and services, often very, very quickly. And as ever, the world moves on quickly, and with local government elections less than a fortnight ago, and as I said, new political administrations being formed, new commitments and priorities will be set out and will drive the local government activity over the next 5 years of the political term, all of which I'm sure will drive a new set of priorities across our procurement sector moving forward. Next slide, please. I think as a former finance director, you'd be hugely disappointed if I didn't mention the perennial financial challenge. The financial environment for local government has been absolutely challenging for well over a decade. And I think challenging is the accepted presentational face we've put on the reality of managing and reducing real terms of resources whilst addressing ever-increasing demands and expectations. And each time, I think that light appears to be emerging at the end of the tunnel. The underlying foundations have shifted once again, and that drives a new wave of financial pressure and a further extension of the medium-term requirement for very significant financial savings for councils to deliver. So I think finance directors across the country will be outlining, I'm sure, that councils are moving into the most challenging financial period for councils in Scotland, and probably the most challenging we've ever faced. There's continued squeeze in resources from the Scottish Government, increasing ring fencing and condition control of spending. Councils' own finances and resources have been depleted after coping with the pandemic. Critical transformation and savings programmes have been interrupted or stalled for 2 years. Demand and services is increasing much more significantly in comparison to pre-pandemic. There's increasing expectations around pay growth in the context of double-digit inflation on the horizon. And of course, as you are all well aware, extreme inflationary pressures across a whole range of commodities and supply as our supply chains grapple themselves with the current economic environment and volatility across markets. But for me, what also makes the forthcoming medium-term period so challenging isn't just the scale of the savings, which will be very significant, but that it's come on the back of such a long and sustained period of similar financial challenge, whilst at the same time, the financial resilience of councils has been really stretched to the limits by COVID and its legacy impacts. So I think local authorities are therefore facing a real financial sustainability challenge like never before, when at the same time financial resilience is lower and financial risks and pressures are higher. I think councils will need to refocus momentum around large-scale transformational change to help address the challenge and fundamentally transform how we work and operate as organisations. COVID absolutely sped elements of that up. So the digital experience, I think, is a great example of that. COVID presented a real mandate, unavoidable need and acceptance to shift to digital delivery for many services. But it also illustrated how we could work very quickly and effectively with others in our communities to respond to needs across our geography. And at the moment, I think as employers, we're all trying to feel our way forward in a new world of hybrid working. And what does that mean? Try to figure it out. What does a modern workplace look like? How are we attractive to prospective employees whilst continuing to deliver top-class services to our communities? Next slide. I think, however, it presents an opportunity to make a real difference together, to work in new ways with our partners to maximising the impact of our actions. And the scale and nature of transformation will inevitably lead to councils progressing change that involves commissioning new arrangements, partnerships to deliver services in different ways. And I think procurement professionals, as yourselves, will be at the very heart of that change. But for me, it also presents a real fresh challenge for councils across the wider procurement agenda. And that is, what do we need to do as a sector if we're going to create the conditions to facilitate a new wave of major procurement savings across local government? So both at a local council level, but also how we operate at the sort of category B level through Scotland Excel. I think we probably all recognise we've absolutely exhausted much of the lower and medium hanging fruit, and an increasing focus in trying to just hold on to those procurement gains we've secured over the years in the current sort of expanding price environment. But we need to explore what we need to do to reach those wider collaborative opportunities in the future. And that, for me, is a big challenge moving forward. I've spoken already about the impact of COVID on our children and young people, the impact of cost of living crisis, child poverty, about the climate emergency that will impact in future generations far more than us. I think, however, there's an undoubted opportunity for us to create a happier, greener, more prosperous future for our children and young people who have missed out on so much over the past 2 years. And we need to continually keep a focus on creating services that are fit for the future and for the future generations. There are no doubt very significant challenges, but at the same time, I think real opportunities to make a lasting difference and to help our communities recover and come back stronger, to improve people's lives, support them through what has been the most difficult of times, and to help redesign local services that are to be delivered in the new post-COVID environment. Working together with our partners, our communities, our citizens, our businesses, creating together and to make, for me, some bold choices as local leaders to deliver a greener and fairer future for everyone. So, I think I'll stop there just to say thanks for giving me an opportunity to speak to you this morning. I hope that's given a short flavour. I think of only some of the key challenges for local government as we move forward. There are many, many more, and I'm sure you'll cover more of them as you get through the remainder of your conference programme this morning. But thanks very much. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Alan. A really interesting and sobering review of some of the challenges that we face, particularly for families in the whole child poverty agenda, which is going to be really challenging for everyone. But also, you ended on a positive note and looking at the opportunities for us to collaborate and work better together in order to deliver what's needed. So thanks again. I'm going to open it up for any questions. We've got quite a number on the call today, so I imagine people are interested and want to hear more from you, Alan. Just put your hands up, your virtual hands, I should say, if you would like to ask a question, or put something in the chat. Everybody's gone a bit quiet. There was some chat on the way through, but I think we've kind of addressed that, Alan. Okay. Alan, I'll ask you. Oh no, Sarah's going to ask you a question.
Thanks very much, Alan. I thought that was really interesting. I was just wondering if you had any opinion around, obviously there's a lot of kind of city deal type of activity and funding going on, and if you see that is maybe a direction of travel moving forwards that might increase over time.
No, absolutely. I mean, city deals well developed, I think, across the UK and obviously Glasgow city regions. I think it's one of the most significantly developed regions in terms of city deal projects and big city deal projects in Renfrewshire. I think, it will, but we're seeing a continual development in that space. So the Levelling Up Fund introduced by the UK government, opening up opportunities for local authorities to bid in for very significant capital resources to support projects. So, for example, last year Renfrewshire was successful in round one in securing just shy of £40 million for a major transport project, which complements our city deal projects here in Renfrewshire. There's another 2 rounds of Levelling Up Fund. There's a new shared prosperity fund being launched by the UK government as well to replace much of the European funding that existed previously. And again, the preference for the UK government is for that to be operating through city regional levels rather than individual council levels. So it's absolutely a growing area. And I think certainly from my perspective and some of the discussions I've had within Renfrewshire is, I think our capacity to support prudential borrowing in the future to deliver our own investment is going to become increasingly challenging as the financial envelope gets tighter. So our ability and how well prepared we are to bid into national funds of that nature is going to become ever more important. And I think that will continue to be an avenue that national governments will explore, where there are bid funds that look to support projects that are very clearly linked to the delivery of key economic and cultural and social outcomes, as opposed to just spreading capital resources across the country. So, I absolutely agree. That's going to be, I think, a feature of the landscape to come.
Thanks, Alan. Just before I bring Neil in, we've got a question in the chat. We know, obviously, from the role that we do, that commodity pricing is very unpredictable at the moment, and if anything, going up for most key commodities, and clearly that's going to affect the capital plans of every organisation in the public sector. It seems to me that we'll need a mechanism to allow us to go back and reflect that as part of a city deal, for example, because I can imagine your capital investment programme via city deal is being impacted by that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly in Renfrewshire and many other councils, we're in a good place in terms of our major capital investment programme. It's really, really significant. You know, over the next couple of years, we're delivering probably well over £500 million of capital investment. You know, fair proportion of that city deal projects, probably about a quarter of it. And, you know, that depending on where your project is and that delivery timeline, the sort of challenges it presents are, you know, possibly different, but there's absolutely no doubt that the sort of volatility and pressures we're experiencing are impacting really significantly on capital projects. We knew that was going to happen through the pandemic, and I think probably every council was trailing that with their members and highlighting the risk that is likely to present in terms of financial pressure.
Yep.
Starts to question, is the same scale of investment achievable as that pressure increases? Or, you know, do councils try and deal with the extra cost pressures and seek to deliver the same outcomes? That's been exacerbated and much more significantly with the fallout of the Ukraine and Russia conflict and the impact that has. So, for example, for Renfrewshire, I can't think of a worst possible time to be building a very significant steel opening bridge over the River Clyde. The timing couldn't possibly be worse. So, you know, it's undoubtedly there. And, you know, it will continue to present real challenges for the sector in terms of delivering capital programmes. And there's also the reality of even, you know, where you are in a contractual position with a contractor about whether these pressures are so extreme. Is the contractor actually even get the financial capability of absorbing it, even if under the contractual position, you know, in theory they're on the hook for it? You know, I think these are some really, you know, real valid questions and challenges that I don't think are going to go away anytime soon. So, yeah, you know, I think it's a distinct possibility that we will see less physical delivery than was envisaged before, because I think the capacity of councils to keep meeting additional costs is going to get much more constrained.
Okay, thanks, Alan. You've got two questions in the chat, and I'm going to take the second one first, purely because it's linked to what we've been talking about. So, a question from Andy Cook, which is, historically, capital funding is easy to find, but how do we bridge the consequential revenue gap that capital investment leaves? And I think that would be close to your heart, Alan.
Absolutely. I don't agree that capital resources are easy to find. But you know, no, it's a really good point. It is a really good point. I mean, I think I'll get back to my earlier point. Councils have been really, really good. Two things: we've been really good at managing the financial challenge, but at the same time, we've been really good at creating the revenue capacity to support prudential borrowing. I think councils have made fantastic use of that power. But it's a really good point that is made, and I think councils have become certainly much better at looking at the whole life cost of capital investment. It's easy. The point being made is it's easier to deliver the big capital investment and not think about what the long-term revenue consequences are of maintaining that asset and thinking about the other revenue consequences of it. So, I suppose my view is that those sort of big investment decisions, certainly in Renfrewshire, are always underpinned by business cases that take into consideration that longer term revenue impact. So it's certainly something I think councils in the public sector generally are much better at recognising now. And as we move forward, those revenue budgets are becoming tighter and tighter. So those sort of implications absolutely need to be taken on board.
Okay, thanks, Alan. And I think this might be your final question, and it's completely different. So it's from Neil Fraser. And given that all the challenges that you've talked about, do you see a need for increased investment in commercial and procurement services within local authorities?
I think there's many sort of professional disciplines across local authorities that we need to continue investing in. We need people with the right skills, the right attitude and values to help us progress. The complex agenda that we've got moving forward. So absolutely, it's I think if we go forward 5 years, what councils look like and how they deliver services will feel and look different to what it does now, and that will present real challenges for local authorities, for our workforce, for us to work differently and to look to deliver services in a different way. So it will need us to continue to develop our skill set and think about what are the best skills that we should hold. What are the best skills and activities we should push out into the external market and let others who are better placed to manage those services. So I suppose from my own council's perspective, a really quick example of that is we've been on a very clear and long journey of pushing out a lot of our IT and digital functions to the market to let them manage those on our behalf, and concentrating on a much smaller in-house team that's focused on providing business support to services to really embrace and understand how we can take advantage of digital. So pushing a lot of that infrastructure activity out into the market, who are much better placed than us to do it. So I think we're going to see much more of that. But I think the big challenge is how we attract and retain those skills and talent moving forward. And I'm sure everybody on the call will recognise that procurement is a key area where it's hugely challenging to attract and retain and keep talent. I think we all spend our time stealing off each other. So we need to do more to attract the right talent into local government and make ourselves be a peer and to be an employer of choice. So some real challenges in there, I think, moving forward, Julie.
So I said that the questions looked like they were nearly done, but they're coming in fast and furious now, Alan, right? So I'm actually taking them in a different order because they're linked to what you've said previously. And Nick has asked a question about, because of everything you've talked about, do you think there's an opportunity for councils to work together around resource challenges? And you've mentioned alternative delivery models for IT and things like that. I think maybe Nick is also coming from the perspective of more shared services, and I know that's an agenda you and I have been talking about, Alan, for 12 years. So I'm interested in your views of whether you think that the current challenges will actually force us to do more of that now.
I mean, I think there's many examples of really good shared services. Scotland Excel being one, and we've talked about this many a time, Julie. So I don't necessarily think that shared services has ever been off the agenda for councils. It's about making sure that where we do look to share services or share our efforts to deliver key outcomes, there's willing partners around the table, and we can see the real benefits of doing it and not just sharing services for the sake of it because we think it's the thing that everybody thinks we should do. I think there's certainly developing opportunities in a changed landscape that might potentially in the future change the views of shared functions that previously, were possibly looked at in the early austerity days, if you like, around services that involved a lot of, potentially, physical moves of jobs, across local authorities, and that, brings its own challenges for local authorities as employers and wanting to retain jobs in their local areas. The new ability to work anywhere, I think, potentially presents new and interesting opportunities around about how you could share services and share resources in the future. So I think it's something councils will look at, not necessarily just to save money, but to create greater resilience, to share skills, and make sure that as a sector we're much better placed to deal with challenges, to deal with peaks and workloads, these types of resilience issues and skill shortages. So I think moving forward, that shared service space will continue to develop, but I think it'll be a much more mature and look quite different to what it might have looked at in the past, where shared service functions that were maybe more heavily developed down south involved large scale shared service centres, in physical locations. I think it'll be a much more refined solution as we move forward.
Okay, thanks, Alan. Moving on to the whole affordable housing agenda, a question from Robert Keddy. How do you see the landscape for local authority affordable housing moving forward in the next 3 to 5 years?
I had some of my housing team here to help me out, but no, I mean, I think there's absolutely a real whether you call it a crisis or not of housing shortages across the UK. Some real challenges beset in terms of increasing house building, whether that be across the private sector, but also affordable housing itself. I think there's variable capacity across local authorities in terms of I suppose council housing, or what was previously council housing sitting in RSLs, and the financial capacity to deliver new house building within that context. So there's a huge reliance on central government support to help make that happen. The current challenges in terms of construction market is absolutely making that more difficult, and more difficult for schemes to stack up. So I think for me the big challenge is whether those sort of market volatilities begin to settle down and return to previous levels, or whether a lot of these price increases and supply chain challenges across the construction sector are here to stay, or will take much longer to resolve themselves, and therefore the big challenge is how affordable and is our existing schemes, and how affordable are future schemes, and how much I suppose public sector subsidy do they need in order to make them viable. And so for me, that I think moving forward, that's the big uncertainty. In terms of the pace at which affordable housing can be delivered. And I think increasingly there'll be the challenge with private sector housing developments about how affordable housing can be better integrated into those in a way that feels less obvious that that's part of the development, and it becomes a key part of all major housing developments across the country.
Thanks, Alan. Sorry, Sarah, you were going to come in.
Sorry, Julie. I'm just I'm aware of the time, so we do have a few more questions there. But what we'll do is, if we make this the last question, we will make sure that Alan answers all the rest of the questions and put that up onto the Academy after the conference, so that everybody can get their answers read out, and we can put that up there for them to get that information.
Okay, there's 2 left, Alan, so we'll get them over to you for your thoughts, if that's okay.
That's fine.
All right, listen, thank you very much, Alan. We really appreciate you coming to spend some time and share your views with us this morning. And the thing that I didn't mention in my introduction, Alan's also the chair of our Chief Executive Officers Management Group. So procurement is something that's quite close to his heart. He doesn't have much choice, to be honest, because we pester him quite a lot. So thanks again to Alan. Our next session is at 10:15. Keeping 1.5 alive, mobilising climate and social action through collaboration, innovation and leadership. And I hope that you all can join us at 10:15. And finally, thanks again to Alan. Thanks for all your questions, everyone. See you at 10:15.